going to be a little out of order on the agenda tonight. It's going to be the approval of the minutes to be passed over, because they haven't been able to be completed. We'll go with HKT with design updates. Number 3 will be the public comment. Number 4 will be discussion of questions. Number 5 will be marketing. And then number 6 will be any other business that legally would come before the committee. And numbers. You lost number 3.
3 would be right after 4, so 3 would become 5. 5 would become 6.
Let's go back here. Okay.
Just tell us each one you want to do in order.
This one would be after all the discussion. It would be after this discussion and this discussion, so it would be there, right
Number
here.
7.
I'll make sure you stay on track.
I know. Okay, so at number 7 will be HKT, architect and Colliers to present the schematic design for approval. Okay? And then adjournment. Okay. We don't have any minutes, so we're going to pass over the minutes tonight. We're going to start with HKT with plan design updates.
You guys may
Yeah.
have- yeah.
We're shopping for more chairs. That's Brighton.
Hello, Joel.
So, we have our own little agenda for our PowerPoint here. An update on where we had since we last met as a group, we had a community meeting on January 17th, where we got some feedback from the community. I think several of them were there. And then the design review committee meeting was on last Thursday morning. We met with the design review committee. I don't know if we want to talk about any of that at all right now, or no? Okay, and we'll move on and talk a little bit about where we are in the schedule and then where we are in design.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about schedule. I'm going to hand something out to the committee members. I can tell you that since I put this is another attempt at the schedule. It's changed since this morning. I'm going to go to speak to Lori today about some of the different meetings, the overlap of the meetings. So we will adjust a little bit, but not significantly. And what it's really focusing on is the actual submission dates to the different committees. We're going to flip the dates around a little bit to pack them in even more, but hopefully to make things clear. So I'm working on that. The schematic design will be completed by the end of February as scheduled. The design development, the dates haven't changed, still finishing out by the end of May or early June. In that time frame, we have 5 or 6 committee meetings, 2 design review meetings, 2 zoning board meetings scheduled, 2 planning board meetings, possibly a third joint CD, 1 community information session. That's 13 meetings in 13 weeks. You know, that's too much. I think for everybody to absorb, this is what is ahead of us. And then we'll have construction documents completed in mid-September in time for the bidding by the end of October. So that's scheduled. Those major categories have not changed. What's inside the design development is what we're going into after the end of schematic design. So that's what we should be talking about. And again, we're going to just do some changing with the schedule from this that you have, but it's not significant. It's basically, when I spoke to the board today, we went over the actual calendar schedule. You don't do zoning board meetings in April, for instance, and we're looking at she tried to look at, the actual dates of, of submissions so that we can overlap them in the correct order. So it's more likely that the zoning board meeting will be scheduled for the March 26th date. And then we look at planning board, the first planning board meeting being scheduled for March 19th. So that's the schedule, and then we'll work from there on those. And probably the next one will be May 7th, and maybe the next one May 1st, whatever, depending on what the results are. We're hoping, we can get rid of meetings. We don't have a lot of zoning relief required. So maybe we only do that one meeting. There's really only 2 items for zoning relief. So maybe these 6 will work out better than this. But this is what I've been asked to hold as a plan concept. So does anybody have any questions on the schedule? You'll see that it also includes the things that the chief asked us to include last time, the deadline to notify the Secretary of State, the deadline for the select board. Those are on the 2nd page. So they're in the schedule now. I said I would include them in this. It's really, for you to keep everything in mind. So that hasn't changed. And then the date of the special town meeting no later than the week of October 14th. I didn't have those dates the last time, but not in here.
I think I remember reading, I'm just gonna look it up, I thought it was October 7th or 8th. There was a date floated of October 7th.
And that's for which?
For the special town meeting.
Oh, October.
Sorry.
October 7th.
Yeah. I don't remember off the top of my head exactly where that came from, but I know
It was
that
my
was.
birthday, so we said we could have.
Oh,
it.
yes, that's right. We should.
Yeah, I'm gonna be 50.
Me too, yeah.
And that's a month.
That's Monday.
I think it had to be before the 14th.
It had to be
right?
before then, but,
Yeah, it was no later than that.
yeah,
So
right,
that's like
right. Yeah, I think,
Be before it.
Yeah, I
so
think
if
it-
we have a date, I can add that.
yeah, obviously not set in stone. We haven't opened the warrant or anything like that yet, but it's been discussed enough that we should probably put it on here.
Right. Okay, so if anybody has any specific questions or concerns, it's a lot of meetings, and you guys will be at one of those meetings with us, as the committee itself. So, anyhow, we talked about it, your planning board obviously meets twice a month, and your zoning board only meets once a month. So we're looking at the March 26th date. If we have to come back to zoning, we can't come back to May 28th, more than 2 months later. That's a long stretch between meetings, so hopefully, we can, any questions about schedule? Concerns?
A lot.
It is a lot.
It's a lot. I don't know how you're getting work done.
We're not. Wait, well, not.
You are, but I mean.
It is hard. It
It's
is
hard.
hard doing, Mark trying to produce, documents and, so, we get these 2 submissions in for, zoning and planning, and during all the estimates being done, we continue to work. We have rolling reviews. We're not stopping because we're going on for the estimate. You don't stop for those 3-4 weeks. You keep going. So we have plenty to do, and this is something else that we're doing. So it's been
Thank you.
okay. Next.
So, we do have the estimate, planned to go to the cost estimator this Friday, so we're starting to get, schematic packages from all of our, engineers, that can be priced, and, we've got a few of those drawings here to show you. Mark was furiously printing out what came in this afternoon before heading out here, so we've got a set that's fresh off the presses. But it's incomplete, yes. We still have some things coming in. So, this is the updated site drawing, and you can see we put that connection between the 2 parking areas in this drawing, relocated where the generator and the dumpsters were to make that work. We still have the separate parking that we've all been seeing. We still have our retaining wall. The retaining wall has changed a little bit since what you saw before with the little jog to create some room for some light poles and some snow storage, but in general, The whole site is designed around operations to meet the needs of the fire department, to make sure that you have the line of sight that you need and the safety features that you need, and that's really dictating the whole design. We have an updated grading plan here, and you can see where some of those swales are starting to happen, where some of the stormwater collection areas and Q-box filters are happening. The retaining wall design is still ongoing. We're still talking to the manufacturer about what might be possible with terracing it, but this is the design that we have in the set right now. Again, with that new jog. The landscape design has got some plantings. There is a plant list. It's kind of hard to see here, but it's down in the bottom corner here. The plant list. The plantings, again, are all designed around what works for the line of sight for the trucks coming out of the apparatus bays, making sure that they have a clear line of sight looking down the street. We also have some grassy areas with spaces for snow storage incorporated into this plan. Again, the stormwater treatment, the plants are all designed to work with where we have the stormwater treatment areas. So you've seen these plans before. I don't think there are any substantive changes since the last meeting on this plan. So this is what you've been seeing the past few meetings again. You think so? I think we
I can't remember.
yeah, we were playing around a little bit with the entry here as we were trying to get windows to work and trying to make sure that we had adequate space.
I think it just shifted over to that one.
Yeah, so we might have shifted a little bit, but other than that, I think these are pretty close to what we've seen before. And same thing with the second floor plan. We may have made a few little tweaks, but I don't think we have. I think this is pretty much what we've seen in the past. And then the elevations. So we wanted to talk a little bit about the elevations. This is the Main Street view that you saw before. Going on to the next one, we did hear some feedback at the design review committee about the materials, and when we do these designs, early on, we try to use color just to show different materials and not necessarily the final color of the building, but at the early stages, it's really just about differences in materials, and I think that perhaps got a little bit misinterpreted, and one of the comments that we got was that they wanted redder brick, and so we did make the brick in the renderings look a little bit redder, and then also seemed that there was a preference for a higher contrast for the different materials, and so we wanted to show the committee what that might look like. The first image here is basically taking the same design that we had over here with the same different material locations and just making that one material that might be a stone, it might be a precast, making it a much lighter and brighter material. And then we thought that might be a little bit too much contrast in some areas, and so we changed that in this elevation and eliminated some of these areas where we had larger amounts of that lighter material and just changed it to some banding features. But we wanted to show the committee what that looks like. We are starting to look at materials. We brought some sample boards here of some things we had around the office and some materials that one masonry rep brought to us just today. They are not necessarily what we're recommending. It's just, again, to show you some of the options that are out there and what they might look like with these different materials. So just to go through the different views, this again is coming down from the center of town, heading out, the view that you would get of the building. And you can really see the difference in this elevation here between the two schemes, whether we keep the more contrast material or whether we have more of the red brick. In the other way, headed toward the center of town. The west elevation. And then the back parking lot area. One view from the southwest. This is the east. And the south elevation, the back of the building. The we were honestly looking for inspiration from the old town hall, and it's handy that we have the painting right here, actually, that we can point to. But we were looking at the, you know, the subtle difference in materiality and color that was in that original building before it was, before it burned and before it was reconstructed. And it had a lot of red brick, and it had that, brown tone, accent here. And so that's kind of what we were looking at when we presented this first pass, for materiality. And we're thinking of the subtle differences of that. It really is a very different look when you get to the high contrast, but we wanted to show the committee what that looked like and then get your feedback on what you thought of that.
Do we want to stop right there so you can get feedback?
That'd
Would
be
you
great.
like to stop right there and get
Whatever
feedback?
you want.
Feedback from the committee?
First, when you were showing these three, I was thinking, oh gee, that bottom right one looks really, really nice. When you then said, pointed to the painting of the old town hall, then I got it. That I didn't get it from that, which I thought was, I understood it was early in materials and stuff like that. Then I got it, and now I like that, and I like that, that's the other prominent building downtown. I think having it similar in some appearance to that makes some sense, and I know the the new old town hall, which was never town hall, looks a little different than that one, but it's pretty close. That's, I mean, just my quick thoughts.
Anyone else? Dan, was that a finger? That you
No, I was
pointed?
pointing at Tom.
Oh,
Oh. I've been nominated?
Oh, I'm sure the architects have something to say when he was there to say.
Yeah, I agree with Mitch. I like the subtle tonality of the first rendition. The second one on the top, I don't care for at all. This lower one on the right has possibility, but it tends to get a little too busy sometimes when you have that much contrast with that different kinds of geometry. You got linear, you got arches, you got banding. And if the detailing is done well on this more muted palette, I think that draws you into the building and you see more. And I think the segmental arches kind of accentuate the linear layout of the building. And I still think the strength of the design is having the functionality expressed on the outside. So we know what is the apparatus bay, we would know the support services and the tower. I would like to see more articulation to the tower. I think
Yeah.
it is going to be a stairwell, a place to dry hoses. They say you need to control your connotations. This looks too much churchy to me. I know we have a lot of towers in town, and they're usually square, not rectangular. So even if there was more glazing, some light, so it's like a beacon, so when you're driving east and west, you know where the center of town is, because you will see this light, whether it's got a clock or not. So that's what I thought. I am in agreement with
So I'm
Mitch.
not an architect, so what do you mean more, you said articulation?
Well, like the windows, maybe there needs to be more mullions and muttons, more breakup
Okay.
of the panes. I think we got
Gotcha.
some comments that,
Those, I do know what those are.
all right. So that would help draw you in more, because
Okay.
it would read there's more detail. I think that's key, is getting the right level of detail. It's well balanced. It's not symmetrical, but it's a balanced linear building and anchored by the tower. So I'm pleased with the progress we've made.
Diana?
I also like the darker version, and the reason for me is a little bit different. When I look at the lower right hand, which I do prefer over the upper, those lighter colors to me but that's gonna be precast, and everyone's gonna know it's gonna be precast, which is a very modern material. And even if you use precast and it's darker, it feels less garish in a way. So my reasoning has to do a little bit more with the association, because I have the colors versus materials, and I think that you are creating a more historic look, as you pointed out, with the town hall. And again, if we go back to Richardson as one of the people that we like historically, it's very much that palette, right? So I think that actually looks more modern with what is going to be clearly
And the precast doesn't gather a nice patina over time.
Right,
It will
especially
stain, it
the
will
light.
crack, it will discolor. So, after the first 5 years, it's gonna be nice and pristine and you'll get that contrast. But over time, it's not gonna wear as well as a predominantly brick structure.
John?
Kind of like the one on the bottom right, but certainly, getting into more red brick, traditional brick colors. I think that banding gives some dimension to it, but, I'm still, absorbing it.
Chief?
Oh, I like the red, but more, I like that. So I think just two, I understand the idea of the contrast. The top one, I'm gonna write that off. I think everyone's done that. I think it's just too much. The bottom one, I actually like the bands over top of the arches. I think that makes the arches stand out more, but I don't know if you could do just that without carrying it all the way across over here. Because we talked about pop, right? And how to do that. I think that really kind of makes the arches, the doors, pop out. Now, we've talked about colors of the door as well, and I looked at this as all red, and it's too much red. If the doors were red, and I like red fire trucks, I hate yellow, green, fire red. Anyway, I think it's too much red. If the doors were red, and the brick is red, and we only have a fine little line, I just think it's too much. But I like the top left one with, and I don't know if it's possible, something over top of the doors to give it a little pop.
I have a question for the architects though, based on what you're saying. So in the one in the upper left, there's still the ability to have multiple colors, it's just that it's muted. So
Yeah.
again, to go to the town hall option, so like I think there's a scenario that's a little bit in between here where those things are articulated with a different color in the same way they are there, it's just not as.
Exactly,
as
that's
bright.
all I was looking for. I think this really jumps out at you. I think it's too much.
So that's a design development discussion, right?
Yes.
Yes. By consensus, I think.
Hang on.
I'm gonna be that guy, I'm gonna be the last guy.
Okay.
I would take any of them, honestly, I'd take any of them. That's my opinion, as long as they work well for the department. But if I had to pick one, I'd pick the lower right. I like that. And I think HKT's done a great job with all three.
And I agree, between the one in the corner at the top and the one in the corner at the bottom, I could look at either one. I do like the fact that this ties into the town hall, so.
Well, that's one of the things we've talked about doing. We're trying, with the Master Plan Implementation Committee and starting here, we're trying to establish stuff downtown. And that old town hall, whether it becomes a town hall or it goes to, it's not going anywhere. At least I would assume it's not, unless, who knows? It's not going anywhere. Let's try and match that. Let's try and tie into it. And I think that this idea really does. I think Mitch pointed that out well. The muted colors really kind of match, and I think that's a great idea.
Okay. So, you have our input?
Could I ask a related question while we have these images up that are related to the colors? The arches, at our last meeting here, I think was the first time you presented this double arch concept, which maybe it was one before that, but.
It was number 6.
Oh, yeah, I remember it was in a long series. A few people have pointed out, well, a lot of fire stations do arches over each door. And I don't know if you gave any thought to that. I'm not saying I dislike this, I do like this. But as I have seen pictures of other fire stations, I was in Boston a couple weeks ago for a conference and looking right out of the Heinz Convention Center, there's a beautiful old fire station there with arches over each door. And if you could replicate that for us, that would be the most beautiful fire station in the world. I know you can't, but that, it made me think, oh gee, would that work better? So I don't know if that's something that, we've passed the point of no return on that. Is there still room ahead for that discussion, or should we
You
nail
did
that
present
now?
something like that, didn't you?
We did, we
Okay.
presented it to the committee
Okay.
and the general consensus was it was too busy.
It was too busy. All right, I believe you.
Some of it has to do with proportion
Yeah,
of that facade, which obviously is working well with the doors.
yeah.
So that was.
I'd like this say something about how historical we're trying to become. You know, we're working with traditional materials. We have a vocabulary that we're very comfortable with the red brick. But there's also a danger of being too historical, because you're not going to be able to match the quality of a lot of historic buildings without significant expense. And I'm comfortable living in the 21st century. I don't mind a traditional building that looks like it belongs in this time. And that's all. That's why I think that building on upper left satisfies that type of criteria for me.
I'm glad you mentioned the E word, the expense word, because I think that's very important, and I think this committee has discussed that kind of somewhat, and I know that we have discussed it, Captain Brillhart and I, that, you know, we're trying to build the best, most attractive building we can, but we also are stewards of the people's money and need to be cautious of that. So while we could throw in all kinds of stuff to make it look real pretty, the cost is gonna go up. And then when you have to start looking at cutting to get the cost back down, I'm gonna be very blunt and honest, and I'm not willing to give up operational performance in order to get a prettier building. It's just not a good way to go.
This is a purpose-built, mission-critical building. It's a municipal building. And, you know, as the chief is saying, operational readiness has to be number one. Everything comes behind that.
Okay. We're ready to move on?
Thanks for entertaining my diversion.
No, I appreciate it. If we didn't have discussion, it would be kind of boring.
There we go. So the next steps, as far as we're concerned, as we said, our cost estimate, is, gonna start next week. We're getting all the drawings, and narratives and outline specifications to the cost estimator on Friday, and, he will be working on it. It should take him about 3 weeks, and then we'll be back before the committee on February 28th, I think is the date, to present the cost estimate to you. We have the design review and zoning board, planning board meetings that, Jan just talked about, and then the community information meeting. What's the next one we have on the schedule?
We have a tentatively scheduled for May 8th. I'll throw that date on.
Can I ask you a question about the cost estimating?
Yes.
If I may? So, there's been some questions from some people about doing multiple cost estimates. So, can we do a cost estimate on this, and then can we do a cost estimate on, and some of this will come up, I'm sure later as we do some public discussion. Can we do a cost estimate on if we put the EOC training room in the basement? Can we do a cost estimate on if we put a third floor on, like we had talked about? Each of those would be a separate cost estimate, right? Can you give us, the committee, an idea of timing, how long it would take, what the cost would be on all that?
Yeah, so, the cost estimator can do things like alternates very easily, and we do have a number of alternates we're gonna ask the cost estimator to price. And that's things like saying, okay, would it be, a standing seam metal roof, or would it be an asphalt shingle metal roof? Would it be an aluminum window with, double glazing or triple glazing, that we might need for the energy code? I've got a list of some of the things that we were looking at. Well, we talked before, the mechanical engineer presented different HVAC systems to you, and he wrote narratives for those different systems so that we could get different costs for that. So those are alternates, and it's all part of the one design that we've been working on all through schematic design, and simple things that he can look at changing out. When we're talking about putting a basement in, we're talking about redesigning the floor plans so that the cost estimator can actually see what that might look like. Once you do the basement, we're taking program out of the other 2 floors, we're putting it in the basement, so suddenly the structural engineer needs to write a narrative of what that basement is gonna be structured like, that it's gonna affect what the site's gonna look like, so the civil engineer has to start doing some drawings to modify the parking lot layout. That once the parking design changes, then the landscape changes, and the landscape architect has to get involved. So these things start to snowball, and we're really talking about entirely different designs then that you're asking the cost estimator to price out. So the cost estimator is very busy, everyone's busy right now. We have him booked for this time. We actually were planning on getting him drawings today, and we called him up and said, can we have 2 more days? And he said, that's all you can have for 2 more days. And we're getting it to him, and he's gonna be able to turn it around in the time frame. So at this point, if we were to take a step back and look at an alternate design, then, we would have to take more design time to define that for the cost estimator. We'd have to get back on his schedule, and yeah, he would be looking for additional services to add another cost estimate. As with the engineer.
So, from what I'm hearing is, it's not cheap.
No.
So there's a definite cost. And again, we just talked about trying to be cost, aware of the cost. I don't know if it's a great idea for multiple estimates.
It's cheap, it's time
Chair.
and cost.
Yeah,
Both.
I know.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about the time.
Because the longer it goes on, what happens?
Yep.
Okay, it gets more expensive, and we potentially lose our window of sliding in
That's
with,
right.
with the fall election and everything
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
That's a
The
real
other
worry
thing
for
I
me.
think to remember is both of those schemes the chief has spoken to, and I think you might reiterate
Sure.
what that does to your operation.
Yeah, but both of them have negative impacts on the operations. So if I start with the first one, and I look at putting the training room into the basement, into the ground, underground. We have to understand, it's not just a training room, it's an emergency operations center. And as such, communications are critical. So I start putting personnel down there with portable radios, we're not getting out. We're just not transmitting out that long. So now we have to look at more money to add in some additional infrastructure possible, to put in some voting, some repeaters to push that out. It's not a conference room, it's a classroom where classes you could be in there for 4 or 5 days in a row for 8 hours a day. That's a long time to sit in a room with no windows. So it's nothing that I think is good. Also, we have ADA issues, so now your elevator's got to go all the way down there. You have issues with getting more people out. And you also have now guys in the classroom downstairs have to come upstairs. You can't take a pole up the stairs. It doesn't work, right? Instead of the stairs, you have to come up the stairs. So it does slow down some response times as well. So that's the whole thing with the basement. It's also not the best place to put an EOC is in a basement. Although you hear say, well, they got the bunker, yeah. More and more places are trying to get out of the bunkers because it isolates you too much. As far as that 3rd floor, and I think I spoke about this when we had originally presented it, is my concern with operations is it really affects communications amongst the different divisions. So we have an administrative division that is on the 2nd floor. We have an operations division primarily way down here. We will never see each other because they're not going to come upstairs, trust me. And we're not going to go down. But if we're on the same floor, that communication happens. And then the living quarters are way up here, so now there's 2 poles to go down, which, sliding a pole isn't a big deal. I did it for many, many years, but there's some hazard in it. So now we have 2 poles for each pole hole. That adds a little bit more complication coming down. So I think it would also potentially delay some response. And correct me if I'm wrong, that's a pretty tall building if we do that. So would that require another variance because of the height?
No.
Okay, so it's not quite that tall?
45 feet to median roof height is allowed.
Possibly.
Okay, so it possibly could, so that's something else to consider. So both of those ideas operationally, I don't like. This design that we've come up with, that we spent many, many months looking at, I think is really the operational design that is best for our department.
Should
Chief,
I-
I think your operative word is workflow.
Yes. Correct.
The way this is designed currently, it's the optimal approach for your workflow.
Correct. I agree, thank you.
So another thing we have to consider is potential for groundwater. So I talked to an engineer from Connerstone, who worked on 90 West Main Street.
Okay.
The proposed first floor elevation was 302. 303. We're at 302, correct? This building, if you put a basement, we're gonna be around 290. You're gonna need at least 12 feet,
Oh, no, it'll be
more than that?
14.
Well, if you put the training room down there, you want to have some height to
You
it.
need 14 feet.
Okay, 12 to 14 feet, so 288 to slab elevation. The groundwater at 90 West Main Street was at 294 and 295.6. So you potentially could have your basement 6 feet or more below potential groundwater. Now, I'm not a site engineer, but I do know that these things tend to find a niche in the layers of earth, and they are constant, continuous. They don't necessarily relate to ground or standing water or wetlands. So the potential of having a swimming pool is more a concern than, say, ledge, which we have no evidence of. So I would point that out, is if we're going to do any kind of deep hole test or borings around the building envelope and maybe potentially up the hill, see if there's any ledge. It's difficult to get a machine to drill on a hill, but we could come in at 11 Monroe at that driveway and possibly get a piece of equipment in to poke around.
We do have the geotechnical engineer scheduled to go out there. They've already put together a plan of where they're planning on doing the borings. They do have a couple going up the hill.
Right.
I'm looking for Sean. Sean, you were involved in that, right? What are we looking at for a timeline for the geotechnical borings?
Oh, I was not involved.
Oh, you weren't involved in that? I
think it was
thought you were.
Scott.
Okay,
No,
just
it was
Scott.
I think they, that Mark has sent all, the proposed boring plan was sent to the town for their review, and I think they're pretty good with everything right now. There's just a conversation going on how the DPW can participate.
There's a couple trees that have to come down and a
Yeah,
few
it's
other
like
things,
that.
yeah.
And so that's ongoing, and I think you've had 9 to 12, 9 to 12, 12 boring
Are those the flags that are on the site right now?
They may be, they may be
I think they were out this
Okay.
week or last, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not sure when they were out.
So that is ongoing, which is one thing I don't want to forget tonight, how we get these, all of the geotech and some other things are all supplemental services, which you've approved as a pay pressure, but we cannot approve all of those without your approval. The basic things we can do, but we always get permission, so you'll have to get permission formally somehow to do the geotechnical and, I have a list here somewhere, I'll get to it.
So we're not trying to go down to bedrock. We're just trying to get soil samples to a certain depth?
It's really completely spelled out in the proposal.
Okay.
When I was doing the proposal with Ken from Colliers, we worked with Scott here, who reviewed it and asked for clarifications or adds or whatever. So the town was very happy with the geotechnical proposal.
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah, it's in the, it's in the original, fee proposal
Okay.
that we sent, but I'm quickly scanning to. So they originally proposed 10 borings, but they think they can do 12 in the days that they had allotted.
They're going to footprint 9 borings, 30 feet or bedrock, and the building code for size like 1 boring, 50 feet or bedrock.
Okay.
Oh, there.
So,
Yep.
Could you guys do me a favor and back up to the site plan just for a second? One more. Here we go. So, in anticipation and after discussion during design review, there was a lot of questions about snow storage. So I specifically reached out to the Department of Public Works and said, what do you think? Do we have any problems here? Help me out. I said, I don't plow, they don't allow me to drive those types of trucks, so help me out. So a couple things we talked about were exactly, it's funny because one of the big things, and if I may, I'm going to stand up here just because it's easier for me to point. One of the big things we talked about was doing this. And they did it already before I had a chance to talk to them. In other words, moving the generator and all this to open this up. This is our road that we can use as snow storage because it's only a temporary snow storage. So if we get snow, we can store it in there. If we need to get it out of there, DPW comes in with a loader and they get it out of there. Because the purpose of this is if for some reason we can't exit this way. On a written, it's not like, oh my God, right now, this second we can't do it. It's, if there's construction going on, if there's something happens, there's a failure, we need to have another way to go. So that's storage. This can now be opened up much more to snow storage. This is snow storage. And this is the other thing that Scott and I talked about, and they did without me asking, which is bumping this wall out, which gives us this whole area for snow storage. So I think that was really great. I think that addressed most of the concerns that we had about snow storage. At least I know, speaking to Scott Charpentier, and Sean, I don't want to speak, did he speak to you about it at all?
Yeah, so the only other area that was of concern, but it looks like it got shrunk back a little bit, is that island in the front of the apparatus, but yeah. His concern was if it's too long, they're gonna have to go back on Route 20 to come into that parking lot. So if we could reduce the size of that, that would make it, more helpful for
Okay.
people.
And Chief, I recall you saying last week, the front and rear aprons will be heated,
Correct.
and I think to about 25 feet from the building?
That hasn't been determined exact
Okay.
distance yet, but that was one number that was thrown around.
Fine.
Could I ask a couple questions while we're on this? Obviously, the retaining wall is a frustration that we're all feeling. We didn't think we needed one back from the design, which I know was somebody else, so I'm not putting that on you. It's here. I mean, it's, I think we're gonna need one. It does present obviously a cost concern and a visual concern that I would love to try to work on to mitigate somehow. I'm not suggesting we change the building is what it is. As the person that spoke up most strongly about having as much parking as humanly possible on this site, if it helps considerably reducing, because I think 30 feet or so is that corner, that lower left corner. From my perspective, I'm willing to lose a few parking spaces if it saves a considerable amount of money or can visually really shrink that wall. That, I imagine, is something we could probably continue to work on because it's not building related. Hopefully you'll learn more with the soil borings and things like that, and maybe you'll be able to do a lot more terracing, and maybe you'll be able to take out more of that hill and just sort of move the slope back for at least what we own over there, and maybe eliminate some of that wall or some of the height of that wall. Another thought that I had is I was at the bank next door yesterday or 2 days ago, and I'm gonna.
You say like me, Mitch, right? It's easier to point.
We up here. Obviously, I mean, because of the wall, this area here really slopes way up. This here is pretty. I mean, there's an incline, but it's not
No, it's
crazy.
dramatic.
What's that?
It's not as dramatic.
It's
as
definitely
the
not as
left.
dramatic. I'm wondering, could we have more parking back here and less parking over there? And I know it throws off a little bit of staff parking, public parking. But that was sort of a question I had, is, gee, that looks like it could probably be a parking lot. I don't know what the rules are about parking and ADA and things like that, whether that's a way to do that. And early on in this process, we had talked about using, even a few further up over here where the house was, as municipal parking at some point in the future. So it was already considered as a parking area. Not part of this project, but it's not out of the bounds of what we've talked about before.
I think, I was just asking Mark, I think that retaining wall on that side
Yeah.
is about 12 feet tall.
Okay.
So, the building next door, they go up quite a bit to get to the plane, and we were looking at their retaining wall. That retaining wall is about 12, we can measure blocks,
Yeah.
and there's 2.5. That's at least 12, maybe 14 foot tall.
This is
retaining
the
wall.
hillside
And
grill
then-
area.
yeah, in that back area, and
Yeah.
then it goes steeply up,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
there's another
Yeah.
retaining wall, and then the houses are right hard on top of it.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's significant.
Yeah.
Retain, it's bigger hill
Yeah,
than our hill.
yeah, and you're talking about that's the,
Just to give you a
to the
feel
left.
for how big that wall is
Yeah.
next door, it's
Yeah.
at least that high.
Oh, yeah.
So, we can't easily make it up that grade, but, maybe we can grade it back.
Yeah.
And Janet, there's a berm along
There is.
this side and a stone wall that is legacy there, that in effect divides this parcel from the grill. But how much, in your opinion, is the wall decision, the wall engineering in the critical path?
engineers are looking at some of the things we've talked about, like the terracing and all, it's complicated because the wall is actually a delegated design. It's a manufacturer designed item. So we're talking to the manufacturers about what might be possible, but, and we'll be able to sort of write a scope around that of what we're gonna do. But I think some of these answers, you know,
We don't know who we're gonna get for these walls, because this is no public bid, you know, we don't
Yeah.
actually have a choice.
If we could just take 1 second and expound on that comment you just made, because I think that is such a critical point for everybody in town to understand,
right.
is that because it is a public building and paid for with municipal funds, low bid wins, to a point.
Lowest responsible bidder.
That's why I said to a point, lowest responsible bidder. So we can't say we want that product unless we can super justify that that's a sole source provider and that's the only thing that'll work, or whatever it happens to be.
We have to provide 3 equal products, or, you know, the way of not doing that is to go for town votes or something, you know.
Yeah, I'm more interested in the design of the wall than I am the products. I don't know anything about products that go into the
While
wall.
the chief is bringing this up, I want to just emphasize, that also means, if we go to design review with this brick, that's this red,
We can't do that.
you might not get that brick,
No.
because you're gonna get one that's close,
Yeah.
but it may not be the same. So it's windows, it's everything.
It's everything, every single product in the building has to essentially have 3. So even if you would pick a gray shingle, the basis of your design is X gray shingle or X metal roof. You may not get that company, and they make it made gray, but it might not be that gray, so that's as close as we can get. That's for every single product in the building, carpeting, on the inside, brick, you know, any windows.
Anything.
You know.
Hardwood.
We'll try to find, you know, manufacturers that make, we search hard, but it's always not, you know, possible to find 3 that create a very similar, but we cannot control that public bid. So, anyhow, I do wanna say, Mitch, one thing, I don't know if you heard, so they are looking, our engineers did talk to one of the, you know, bigger wall engineers, and they were saying that if you terrace it, it grows taller.
Mhm.
It doesn't get smaller.
Yeah.
So it could go from 30 to 40 feet tall
Mhm.
overall, as you terrace, because you don't actually, it doesn't.
It wouldn't be,
shrink.
it would be either 1 30-foot
It could be
up,
130.
or it could be, you know, 3 12-foot.
Yeah, and if
Yeah.
we do pull the parking in, we're trying to follow the design guidelines, you know, you're not allowed to have parking beyond the front face of the building, so that's why our parking starts where it does. And, you know, we lose parking and we try to pull that wall back, we can pull it back if we lose a bunch of parking. There's no doubt, but it's not gonna be dropped down more than 5 feet or something. Even if you bring it in 25 to 30 feet, it might drop 5 feet.
Mhm.
It's not gonna drop down
Yeah, right.
to 20
Yep.
even, or 10, it's never gonna get there,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
without it.
Yeah,
I mean,
that-
I don't
yeah.
know that for certain, but
Yeah.
that's my gut, because of the grades, you can see the grades, so to speak.
And, you know, the only other comment about parking, and you weren't the only one that advocated for it.
Yeah.
Master Plan Implementation sat here and said, we want more parking. Not here at the library, but said, we want more parking. So that's just another, you know, again, if we start taking it away, it's just something to realize.
Totally agree. Yeah, all of this is finding the right balance. We could probably come up with more things that we would want that would add another $5 or $10 million to the cost of the project.
Oh, I can put lots of ones in this
Yes.
building.
Yeah. Now, what about the idea of more parking along that side, near the bank?
You mean
Going
more
back.
parking
Yeah.
coming up here?
Yeah.
I mean, we can certainly talk to the engineers about it, but even over here, the grades are rising.
Yeah.
So, you know, the farther you go back, the more you have to retain. So we can talk to them about what might be possible. And I
Yeah.
think, you know, you end up with a bit of an operational issue too, because
Yeah.
then you're trying to get people to walk across this back apron here, on their way into the building, which I'm sure. you
Yeah,
know,
and no one's gonna park on that side who's coming into the building. That would be if someone's going to the park and they want to park there, but then we also get back into the issue of people coming in while we're trying to respond out, right? Which is always that's always an issue, because the idea was emergency vehicles can go out that way without having to worry about, because like right now, we have a big sign at our station right now that says, no parking, no entry. You wanna know how many people drive in there and ignore that? And now either the squad or something's coming out of there, and if you're not aware that that could be happening, I know when I'm driving in, because I have my radio, so I know that they're coming. But other people may not know, it's just, it's a dangerous situation.
I think our landscape architect at the one meeting asked some of the people where they could park, and they wanted to wind through Monroe's, up in Monroe, but it has to be accessible to public.
You get
transport.
ADA issues.
So that hillside negates the possibility, if we end up parking up higher on the terrace, somehow you can't then get down without,
Yeah, needs to
as
be,
they say, grant
yeah.
is.
Yeah, it needs to be
So
under
there are
7% and
ramifications
stuff
of
like
that
that,
too.
yeah.
So we have to put back in the tank.
So that would be applicable whether it was the staff parking there or the public, yes or no? The ADA issues?
Public.
I understand public, but if it's staff only on a higher elevation, is it still subject to the ADA?
No, ADA doesn't come in there, because it's, if it's restricted to only employee parking. Okay.
What about admin?
Are you indicating our admin are handicapped and need accessible parking?
No, I'm not.
You could be very accurate.
But in
Admin
20
parking
years,
is down
maybe
below.
zero.
Admin parking is down below.
Okay, well, I just meant, yeah. Can I ask a question about the retaining wall?
Yeah.
With the delegated design, do you still review a submittal?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so you still.
Yes, so just for people who don't understand the delegated design, the company that makes this is going to do the engineering with their own engineers. So we can talk to them a little bit during the design process and get sort of, some feedback about what it might look like and things we should be considering. But, our engineers are not designing this because it's the specific products engineers who actually design it. So to Diana's point, we won't get those actual design until the shop drawing phase. A contractor gets hired, the contractor decides, I'm gonna use retaining wall X, which is one of the three that you specified, or not, or an equal that they think. And then that company, prepares a submittal that gets submitted to the design team. We look at it, the civil engineer looks at it and decides whether or not it's gonna work. So, we're working with the manufacturers to get as much information as we can right now, but they're not gonna design this until they know whether or not they're gonna get the job. And that won't happen until a contractor is selected. And that's the way a delegated design works.
So the design doesn't even take place until post-bid.
And they have their own specialty engineers who just design.
Right.
Their system.
Okay.
But the estimator will still be able to have
Yeah.
an associated
Right,
cost.
right, but so you're just basically saying, we need a retaining wall to retain this.
And
Not
we-
even explicitly saying where the wall is, because they,
We send them drawings, and yes,
Okay.
we show them where we want it, we give,
okay,
and if they were to, if they were to send a submittal that didn't work with our
Right.
design, there would be back and
Yeah.
forth and everything, but
okay.
these are specialty engineers who
Okay.
design
That
these
product,
retaining
Yeah.
their
walls,
wall on
Okay,
our
yeah, I've
side.
never dealt with a project with some of the design took place post-bid. It's interesting.
So when we say, Janet, for the sake of conversation, a 10-foot wall, is that from the footing up? In other words, how much of that might be below ground?
Oh, there's definitely something going on, I don't know what
I
that
don't
is.
know.
Yeah.
But
This
there's
is,
no
when
rule
we're
of
saying
thumb.
30 feet, it's from what you see on the surface up.
Okay, thank you.
That's what we're measuring right now. A finished grade, which was 304 up,
Thank you.
right now. Yeah, that's all we have from, anybody, any more questions on the site, or, you can always ask us afterwards.
If we can go back to the three designs that we were discussing, the one that was like this.
Hey.
Okay. I think by agreement, we need to decide that design we want to go with. Excuse me, Amy.
I just wanted to know if I could show you a picture of what the town hall looks like now. It doesn't, it's not the colors of that building, can I just show what it look like?
You can show.
And then you can decide on color, I wouldn't wanna have to make that choice, cause
I
you
don't
know.
think we're deciding on color, we're
Oh,
just deciding
okay.
on.
I just wanted to show you really quickly, it doesn't
I know what it looks like.
it has the
Drive
white.
by it
and
every
the-
day.
I know, it has the white and the red, not,
Thank you.
yeah, sorry, it's just different than that picture.
I think what we're really discussing is if we want to go with, a mass of different colors, or if we want
A more muted.
muted look.
Yeah.
And I would like a motion from the board on what they would like.
Make a motion, a more muted, less contrasty version.
Similar to the upper version.
Similar to the upper left. I mean, maybe the color as a whole should be a little bit brighter. I don't know. That's later.
It will be redder.
Yeah,
The design as well.
Okay.
yeah.
And
But in terms of contrast, I like the upper left more than the lower right. It's certainly more than the upper right.
and accepting that design.
Before we accept a design, are you talking about just the colors or design as a whole for schematic design?
Basically, the design is full.
I think we should go through public comment and the letters we received before we take a motion on moving this over to the next phase.
All right, let's go with the color for now. Do I have a second?
Second?
Okay, all those in favor? Okay. All right, thank you. Okay.
Want me to close out of this, or you want me to have this up for reference?
You may want to leave it up in case there's some questions.
Okay, we're going on to public comment, limited to 3 minutes. It must be related to an agenda item. We have no extra mics, so we're gonna have to use a mic there or a mic there. You'll come up and state your name and address. It's limited to 3 minutes, and the chief is gonna time it, because obviously we're going to have a long meeting tonight, so, anybody from the audience that cares to comment? Mr. Scalanti.
I'll wait till you get up before I start the time. I'm
Thank you,
generous.
thank you. My name is Henry Squilanti, 72 Crestwood Drive. Can you show me the layout of the second floor? I have a question on that. Where the patio, see where you have like a patio going out the top? Could that be closed in? Is the first floor structurally strong enough to, if you wanted to extend and put another room on top of that instead of having the, like a deck? Is the structure below it is strong enough, you don't have to reinforce it in sometime in the future if you want to add a room on there?
We can make sure, I mean, I don't think that they would probably just change up, but we can ask.
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
Sure.
because if you want to add someday, you want to find out, you got to make it stronger on there. The other one had to do with the parking lot. You know, the chief, you said that they were, on the original plan, you were going to bring the engines in off of Monroe Street, I think it was?
Unions were never going to be coming off Monroe Street.
Okay, but would it make sense to put maybe not a paved road, but an entrance so you could bring something in from Monroe if you wanted to, you could chain it off?
I think there was talk about that back in 2019.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Mitch, during the feasibility, there was some kind of talk about using that as an entrance, but.
Maybe an
But
early
I,
feasibility.
but I think the issue was the grading that came into
Okay,
play and having
okay.
to drop down.
So if you wanted to bring equipment in there or something, you wouldn't want to have an access?
No.
Okay, all right, that's my 2 questions, thank you.
You got a minute left.
Okay, I'll give it to somebody else.
Yep. Hopefully you don't time me till I get up there either.
Oh, it already started.
Actually, oh, thanks. Amy Paretsky, 47 Indian Meadow Drive. And the first thing I wanted to bring up was the training room. I know you had mentioned, when talking to another fire station, their recommendation was not to open to it the public. I know I'm probably talking against the MPIC, and I was on it, but that fire station said when you're bringing in the public and mixing it in with the operations and the safety
Ask
of
who you spoke with, what department?
Southborough.
Okay, you spoke with Southborough.
Yep.
Southborough was a public safety facility with police and fire, whole different ballgame.
Right, but they opened theirs to the public, and they said if they had to go back and do it again, they wouldn't. And so if you kept it just for operations of the fire department, then you could, like Mitch was saying, bring back the parking. You wouldn't need as much parking.
No, we still would, because it's a classroom where we would be having potentially classes of a lot of people there, or it's also, more importantly, the Emergency Operations Center, and we have to have enough parking for all the different positions in the EOC, which could be significant. The deputies from Southborough, would you like to speak to?
Yeah, do you want to get on a mic or these?
Yeah, you gotta get on a mic.
Is this going into my minutes? Because I've
I'll pause you.
You have to pause me.
So yeah, I just came from Southborough only like 5 months ago. They did originally open it up to public groups. That became a logistical nightmare. So committees can do it, and actually they just implemented all the owls and microphones, so it's now one of the town's official meeting areas.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so maybe not to like the general public is what they
Okay.
said.
The idea for the general public was to make it a more palatable process or program. I don't think you're gonna find anyone in this fire department that's gonna say, oh, no, we want them there. The idea is if it's needed, it's another room for them. So I'll start you again.
Okay, that was about saving parking, hopefully bringing the wall down, because that's like, as you know, the biggest concern is the height of the wall and the cost of the wall. Another question I had was you talked about operations, and I definitely want it to be as safe and everything that the fire department wants. But 2019,
I'm
when
gonna
we-
stop you right there, Andy.
Well, I know.
I've told you 4 times, probably, the 2019 plan was a conceptual plan. It was based on limited surveys, it was based on limited information. It was strictly to purchase the land, hire the architect, and hire the OPM. It was in no way, and Mitch can speak to this as well,
Can I
because
just finish what I was gonna say?
on the feasibility committee, but I just want to be very clear
Okay.
that plan, it keeps coming up, and it really shouldn't,
I
because it
just
wasn't the purpose
want to
of it.
finish it, is when it went to town meeting warrant, there's an article, and it said that they did go out for the feasibility and the size of the building would be 23,000 square feet. And now it is up to 30,000 square feet, which made it bigger, pushed it back towards the wall. And I just hope, like you said earlier, that you keep the taxpayers in mind too. I know there are a lot of people on limited budgets, and I think, we have to do the town hall, the fire department, a lot of different buildings. And so I'm not saying that I recommend taking away any of the rooms. I just know it went up 30% between then and now, and I just wanted to,
I understand that.
yep, I just wanted to bring that up, and if the wall could come down and parking a little less in the back. Thank you.
Mitch, do you want to talk to the feasibility and what we were just?
I mean, broadly speaking, feasibility is feasibility. It's, can you make roughly what do you need for a fire station? Can you make it work on this site? Town meeting approved it and said, yeah, this is where we want a fire station. This is still, if you look at the floor plan, it's still basically the same thing. It did get a little bigger because during the real design process, which didn't start until a few months ago, you go through and you look a little bit harder than you did in
We looked
feasibility.
40 years out as opposed to, yes.
Yeah, you look further out and you have more experience, you've been thinking about it more, seeing more stages. And the design always changes between feasibility and the actual design process. But it is still basically the same thing and the site still works. It does present more constraints than we were aware of then, because feasibility didn't do the detailed site survey and never does a detailed site survey that you do during this design process. And it's unfortunate. I don't want a retaining wall.
I just know going up
Yeah.
30%
Yeah.
in size brought it $4 to $5 million more.
Yeah,
We have
we
no
haven't
idea
done a
what it
cost
was.
estimate yet, so we don't know what the
We'll
impact is.
compare it, yeah.
But I mean, yes, increasing
those
the
old
size
prices,
obviously
it
does
could be
make it
more.
more expensive. But everything that has been presented to us relative to then has operational necessity and operational justification. We can talk a little bit about the public parking. I said, I'm a big fan of the public parking. If we could save a real good chunk of money by losing a few spaces, I will cry a little bit, but I'll be okay with it. But I do not want to sacrifice anything about the operation of this building, which is the reason that we're all here.
I think it should be pointed out that we're 5 years later, too. The needs of the department have actually changed even in the last year, looking for the grant and looking to implement new personnel. So if the department's growing faster, the price is going up, only, even if we kept it exactly the same size, the price would be going up. And we knew that from the time we went to town meeting. It's like every year, we knew it was gonna be $1 million to $2 million more. We were told it many times. And we can't help the pandemic and what happened, and the fact it took so long to close on the property, but that didn't help our prices any.
And I think if you did go back to the size of that early feasibility study in terms of the building, you'd still need a significant retaining wall.
At this point,
It's not going away by shrinking the building. So I think that needs to be understood.
I agree. I think, and again, and Not saying anything about who did the feasibility study in any ways, but I think that once we had gotten into design, we would have ended up in the same place. I would concur.
Anyone else?
Hi, Mike Tejan, 30 Auger Avenue. And just a couple of questions, and if I'm repeating something that you covered, just let me know. In a previous meeting, it was said that the building should last, I think, 40 or 45 years. Is that just sort of a number where you would sort of reassess operationally and see if there's improvements or a new structure, or is there a difference in construction and material to a 40-year building, 50-year building, 75, 100-year building?
Yeah, typical fire stations last year about 50 years because so many things change in what were required. So if you look from the original station to the station that they built over on Church Street to the station we're in now, right? They've each one's grown because things have changed, requirements have changed, sizes of trucks. We went from horses to motorized, right? So it's all changed. So an estimate is 50 years is what you normally look at for a municipal building. Okay. And then maybe at that time, everything's doing great, nothing's changed, size is fine, we keep going. If it turns out, no, we need more, we may even at that time say, no, this station's fine, but we need something because we've had a ton of development in a different part of town, we need to put a station over there. So it's all considered at that time.
Gotcha, understood. And then obviously it's downhill, right, because you're talking about a retaining wall. Was there consideration given, I assume it's not in a flood zone, but any extra water or water issues, an additional drainage because water is going to come downhill towards the building?
I'm just gonna,
Yep.
so, the engineers are looking at that. It's kind of hard to tell here. These lines here are contour lines, and when you see this sort of shape, what that's showing is that they're sculpting the grade to direct water to flow over to a drain that they've got over here. So when the water is coming down the hill, then they're gonna direct it along the wall to get it to a drain, to make sure that it doesn't go over the
So rather
wall
than my
and
idea of
build
it
it
just
back.
going straight down, there's a method to it. Okay, gotcha. Okay. And then I saw on the site plan the generator. Is that natural gas fired for backup or diesel?
So, it's a great question. You don't use natural gas for an emergency generator for a fire station, because if you have an earthquake, what happens?
Right.
Bad stuff, right? So, most likely it'll be diesel.
Okay.
Which is what we have now. That's your typical generator you use for emergency generators, because you can refill it. It's not like LP, you may have issues. We're gonna be able to we can go down to the corner station if we need to get diesel fuel and bring it back, so.
Right, okay.
That's what it would be
So
powered by.
given that, even if, there's a gas line on Route 20, the building's heat, cooking, none of that?
We have everything we need.
Natural gas?
Yep.
Gotcha, okay. And then I'll try and be quick. Just in the off chance, would you ever have to land like an air asset, a helicopter, anywhere in or around?
No, we have LZs that we have maps that have LZs set up all around town. And we have those, we're LZ1 or LZ2, so there'll be no reason to have to drop anything here. We have enough areas where we could. So
Okay.
if it's on a highway, we're dropping it on a highway.
Right.
If it's somewhere else, we have Memorial Field we can drop it on. We have, some of the other schools have big fields, we drop it. Excuse me?
We've done Z School.
Z School, right, so we have all those fields, so that's where we would use.
Okay, and I think in the current plan, there's no plan for a basement or anything, so this wouldn't be like a public shelter in any type of situation?
So no. They used to use fire stations as shelters. Not a good idea. And sometimes you still have to. The best thing I can give you is when they had the shooting in Connecticut, Sandy Hook. The fire station was down the hill from the school, so that's where all the kids went. But that station is, during a natural disaster, is busy. There's stuff in and out, there's people all over, right? You don't want to mix that with other people. We have a designated shelter, which is Milliken Middle School. It has a generator for it, it's all set up for it, it's been approved through the Mass Emergency Management. They come out once every couple of years and go through it all. That's our designated shelter.
Okay, and then last question, I don't see the tunnel across the street to the Dunkin' Donuts.
No, because it's overhead.
Oh, okay.
In fact, it's piped in. Drones. I want one of those little air pressure ones like a bench.
That's all I have, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Julianne?
Hi, my name is Julianne Hirsch. I live at 19 Smith Road, and I'm speaking as a resident. So I don't know if you want to go back to the picture with the three possibilities of the outside of the building. So first of all, full disclosure, I do a bit of gardening, I go to classes, but I am not a professional gardener or a talented one. But one of the things that always comes up is that it is appealing to the eye to do things in odd numbers. So did you consider at any point with the arches doing 3? You did?
Yep, we looked at options with one big arch going over everything. We looked at options with the 2, with 3, and with 6. And this was the one that the committee felt looked the best.
Okay, so it was, the committee decided that, because the 3 would kind of mirror the, the 3 sections of the building. You would have 3 and then 3 sections, 3 with the overall picture. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ron?
Ron Doucette, 29 St. James Drive. I would think to the chief that if you looked at and talked to different fire stations from 1 year to 5 year and see what they said, oh, heck, I should have done A, B, C. Get it done now, because it'll cost you twice as much later on if you find out that these particular windows are no good, or they're drafty, or whatever. I would consider looking at other buildings.
You know what, we did. So as the feasibility, we went to, I can't tell you how many, we went to 6 different buildings. You know what the biggest complaint was? We didn't put enough storage in. And then the deputy and I have been to some for meetings, not just recently, and even recent ones, we didn't put enough storage in. Because you always have something, you have hose, you have foam, you have all kinds of stuff you have to store, which always we didn't put enough storage in. So that's something we really looked at and considered with the mezzanine, and we had a lot of discussions about bulk storage and where we can put it. If you come in our station now and you walk around, we have stuff stored everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a free corner, it ain't free for very long. It gets filled up pretty quick. That's a great point. Well, we did that. We looked at all the stations. We talked to them. What went well? What didn't go well? What did you wish you did differently? What did you really like? So we did all that. That was all considered as part of the design.
Everything's going to be hung, I assume, the fire jackets and blah, blah, blah. Versus any metal.
Go back to the interior. There's a room for gear. That's where all the gear goes.
Okay.
It's actually a special room that has a special exhaust system, so when the turnout gear is off-gassing, the firefighters aren't exposed to it. It's all taken care of.
Okay, because as you say, there's never enough room, and if there's closed
Yep.
cabinets, it goes on the floor.
So with the way we built these, is we built with enough cabinets and then some. So we built enough to expand out. So right now, you could put your gear, and then if you would probably have a second locker available to you. Now, 20 years from now, after I'm gone, 2 years from now after I'm gone, we'll have, who knows? But I'm telling you, how many lockers? We did 48?
I think 48.
48 lockers?
Yeah.
So we have plenty there.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Okay, we next have the discussion of questions submitted via our webpage. Okay, so I'm going to start. Al Aldrich sent in questions. Question 1 was the original 2019 concept plans depict a smaller, simpler rectangular building and the site that had a 2019 estimate cost of $14 million. What is the building area and the estimate cost of the latest concept?
So the building area is 30?
31,000 right now, the final number, and the estimate will be complete at the end of February. And I'll be able to tell you the number.
Oh, and just real quick, if I may, Madam Chair, before you go on. This request came through our website, as we had asked. It wasn't answered right away because we decided as a board that we would answer them at the committee and then reply as the board. So I don't want anyone to think that if you send something in, you don't get it back within a week. I'm not replying. I could reply and let you know I got it, but but the fact is, that we're not going to respond back to it until we meet as a committee, and that answer comes out as the committee. So I just want to make sure that that's voiced.
Thank you. The original concept plan situated the building and site improvements to enable construction of a landscape sloped banking instead of the proposed very large retaining wall that now encompasses the site. What changes are possible to reduce the financial and visual impact of this wall and replace it with a terraced or landscape banking? I think we've discussed this, but if you want to quickly.
I guess what I would say is it was discussed at the meeting, and I recommend you watch I mean, what do you guys think? Do we want to go through and put the whole thing out again? We discussed the cause?
Yeah, and we've talked about the fact that this site, for any fire station on this site, is going to need a retaining wall of some sort. And it sounds like you're still working through the design, and you've heard some more feedback. And you know, my opinion is just one member of this. I wish we could find a way to do away with the whole wall, but I know that's not possible. But let's try to minimize it as much as we can, both cost and visual impact. You know, this is an important building visually for the genesis of additional downtown revitalization. So it's, you know, it's important to build.
Madam Chair, may I suggest in responding to questions like this, where we do give them a textual answer, and where we've had discussion in committee, refer them to that date and YouTube URL.
That's what I'm going to do. So basically, I'm taking notes here, so I make sure I get our
So
information.
you want to not just answer in the context of a meeting.
I'm going to reply back.
Okay.
So what I put was discussed, it's been discussed at several meetings. There is a wall needed. There's nothing we could do about that at this time. It's currently, the design is currently in process, but we don't know what the cost is or what the cost savings will be. I recommend you watch the meeting that we had on this date for further information.
Okay. New synthetic hoses and the need to clean contaminated hoses with mechanical washing and drying equipment has made observation hose drying towers obsolete. Firefighter training associated with the tower could be accomplished from modifications made in the apparatus bay. What are the estimated building and future maintenance cost savings with the elimination of the tower?
You want me to answer that, or you guys want to answer? Because you've heard me say it enough times. It's not just a hose tower, it's a training tower, which is its primary use. There are multiple landings as we go up through. That's what we need to simulate. How to stretch hose up, come back down, and not make an attack. It's not something you can just do interior in a mezzanine. It's not made up for that. Now, the mezzanine will have some training props in it, and we'll have some other things that we can do with it, but it's a different type of training. We also still, I can't stress this enough, because I just saw something on Facebook from a firefighter in a neighboring community. Wow, I haven't dried hose in 15 years. Ooh, well, I'm not your chief, am I? Number one. Number two, frozen hose has to be hung. Ropes have to be cleaned and hung. While, and I'm going to say this again, while the manufacturers will tell you, you don't have to wash, you don't have to dry our hose, you can load it right back on. You go ahead and load wet hose back on and then uncover that hose 6 months later. Is it going to be moldy? No, it won't be moldy because it's polyester. Is it going to be yucky and slimy and probably have some odor to it? Yeah. And that's probably why they recommend on those sites, dry it before you put it away. You don't have to, but they recommend you do. And it's great. If we were in New York City and we're running fires constantly, that's the hose I want, because I'm putting it back on and I'm taking it right back off. We may go to a fire in February, put that hose back on, and not come off that truck again for 4 months, or until it's tested, right? So I'll kind of summarize that. Is that okay with you guys?
Can I ask a follow-up question? I remember seeing the question. I don't remember if it was in one of these or not. The training in the tower is interior, not exterior to the tower.
It's interior.
Interior, right.
Yeah, so the intent is not to use the exterior for laddering. The only thing we would do that with is if we had a new guy and we were teaching him how to use the tower, how to use the ladder truck that is a tower, because that is a unique truck. And it's nice to be able to learn how to position that on higher buildings. And this way, we don't have to go into Algonquin, or we don't have to go to one of the other facilities on a weekend or at night, because we don't want to be there during the day if we don't have to. This allows us to pull that truck out front, set it up, and let them practice for locations.
Someone had asked about, when we move the tower in back so it's not as visible when you're doing trainings outside, but generally you're not doing that. Okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Okay, Numerous public meeting rooms with adequate parking are located throughout town buildings, schools, and potentially in 4 West Main Street, should that project go forward, making this public meeting room appendage unnecessary. Fire department training room, fitness room, mechanical, electrical, storage, and other rooms could be located in a lower level basement below the administration area, creating space on the second floor to accommodate the dormitory rooms that were above the public meeting room. What is the net estimate cost savings between a lower level solution and the elimination of a public meeting room appendage? 30 public parking spaces associated with a portion of the retaining wall.
I think we answered that very well earlier in the meeting.
I do, but I need to respond to him, so I'll respond to him that, I don't need to, but I think it's appropriate to respond to him. I'll respond to him, we had this discussion, I'll give him some of the facts that we gave of why we don't want to put it in the basement, and I'll recommend him back to this meeting to view it. Is that okay with everybody?
It is.
Yeah, I think the biggest key is it's not just a public meeting room.
It's an EOC.
It's a training room, it's there for fire department needs. Public is secondary, and the water table makes it, from my position, just a complete deal breaker for underground.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
One other note for that, if you do put it in the basement, you are going to increase the square footage with additional stairs, elevator stops and all.
Cost would actually probably go up because there's more square footage. And before you read this one, Madam Chair, if I just may, so this, the one we just did is the only one that came over our website ask. The one that we're about to read never came to the Fire Department Building Committee from anyone outside. It actually went to design review, it went to the select board, it went to the town administrator. I only got it because it came from them to me, but because there were some questions, I felt it was important to bring it to the chair's attention and that we should address it. But it's really critical, you go to our, if you have questions or concern, go to our fire station project webpage. First of all, there's a huge frequently asked questions section on there, which will answer a lot of the questions that we're currently getting. They're on there, the answers are on there. Secondly, when you click to submit it, a question, it goes to everyone on this committee at the same time. So it's not going to get lost by coming just to me or to just the chair. It goes to everybody. So I really recommend if you have questions, that's how you submit your questions. It would just help us a lot.
Okay. The second ones were submitted, as the chief said, to the design review committee, and some recommendation. I'm going to kind of generalize this a little bit, but the hill behind the site is probably myelinite or very similar, very hard, metamorphic rock, which would require extensive blasting. Price tags, make sure your cost estimates are not prohibited.
He said beside a 7-digit price tag, I cut it out, Madam Chair, if you'd like me to go ahead. Besides a 7-digit price tag, Route 20 will need to be closed, Duncan's windows will be in jeopardy, and wells in the area may be compromised. Please make sure cost estimates are not prohibitive. My neighbors had to abandon the construction site due to the ledge we have in the area. First of all, we don't know if there's any ledge there at all. We have no idea. That's why we're doing the borings. Second of all, the project right next door did not pull a blasting permit for their construction and for their walls. That leads us to think that maybe they used a different mechanism. As we discussed in design review, there's other ways to get rid of rock than just blasting. You can go in there with the hammers, right? There's different ways to do it. Finally, I have been overseeing blasting for a long time. I've been issuing permits since I've been a chief officer, which is 2001. Does damage occur? It has. I'll be very honest with you. But it occurs when a building is 10, 15, 20 feet away from a blast site. The closest building to what I can tell, and I went through and did a whole bunch of figuring, barely falls into the requirement for a pre-blast survey, which is 250 feet. So the state says if your building is within 250 feet of the hole, you have to be offered a pre-blast site, a pre-blast survey. Most of those buildings are further away. Now, does that discount anyone's concern? Absolutely not. I think their concern is fine, and I think we need to be aware of their concern, and we need to consider that as we're moving ahead. But I think we're way, way too early in the process to say, oh, it's going to cost 7 figures to blast. I don't even know how far back we'd have to go. I don't know. I don't know how deep we'd have to go. I don't know. And when you do those pre-blast surveys and they determine things are too close, they design their blast. They have a blast design, a blasting plan, and they do more blast at smaller blast to reduce the impact, as opposed to, oh, let's just put one blast and blow it up, because everyone sees the videos where they do the quarries and they go, and they're all, that's not what's happening. Okay, there's small little blast and it goes boom. That's about it. Seriously, if you've ever seen one, there's not a whole lot to it. So it is something we would definitely consider and be worried about and take every precaution to stop something from happening. And I'll kind of summarize that if you want to.
Would you anticipate the need to close Route 20 when, if there's blasting here?
No, not necessarily, because it truly depends on where it is.
Yeah.
And what I would require would be blasting mats. And again, I have the ability to require that. So I can say, you're going to put blasting mats, and not only are you going to put blasting mats, you're going to cover the blasting mats with dirt. Okay? Because we don't want any fly rock. Fly rock is what is the resulting of poor matting, poor covering. And you're going to design your blast design in such a way that we don't have to worry about that. So, well, that's going to make 10 more blasts. I really don't care. Well, that will affect the cost. Okay, that's something then we'll have to discuss and see what we do, right? Because the more blasts, the more cost, the more time, whatever. But that is something that can be controlled.
Okay. All right, we have the training room and the FEMA bunker. This adds unnecessary length to the building, and I understand staggering it towards the rear end. The rear would increase the retaining wall. Why is it not a basement under the offices?
I will provide the same answer I provided to the previous gentleman, if that's okay with you all, and reference him back to this call, this meeting.
Yeah.
Okay. I think that was it for questions on that. On his.
Current
Oh,
layout.
excuse me, he did talk about rotating, right?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
next. The current layout is excellent, rotating the building 90 degrees so the bays are parallel to the West Main Street. You want to discuss why?
So we did that, Mitch, if you recall, we did that in the feasibility
I
study.
remember one like that.
And there's some inherent problems with doing it that way. First of all, you've now added an extra turn. Okay, so the trucks have to come out, turn, and then come out again. That's problematic, because now you have issues with trucks turning. Pardon?
You have to go very wide.
You have to go very wide so the trucks can come out. So, and we're already worried about how wide this is. Now we're making it even wider, right, for that issues. And it also changes where the main entrance is. And the design review guidelines require that main entrance to be on the street, on the street side. So if we put that there, if the main entrance would go in the back, that would kind of cause problems, because it doesn't meet the design review guidelines. If we try to put the bays in the back and put the entrance in the front, now we have to go further back, and we're worried about more.
Further back than we are.
So it's not really a practical option to do that.
And in any of those, all our parking goes away because it's eaten up by
All the parking,
turning.
all the spare
trucks.
parking goes
Yeah.
away. Correct.
And Chief, you're digging deeper into that hill.
We are. Yep.
If the building is not rotated, we should consider moving the training tower to the rear of the building, as it would allow exterior ladder training and repelling without distracting traffic.
Well, I think that's already been discussed earlier in this meeting. We discussed that in, how do you guys, what do you want for an answer for that one? Anything different than we've discussed, and I'll refer them to the meeting for the discussion.
Asked and answered.
Okay, and we have two other letters from members of the design review. So a lot of,
You think that was it?
a lot of these.
I'm sorry, Don, could we go back to Mark's email? It was another item on his
Was
list.
there something?
It said, allow a parking lot access through the lot on Monroe to the office entrance elevation. We discussed some of that earlier. We can't combine them, but I think we did talk back then about the idea of, as a separate municipal project, a parking lot further up on Monroe, which I think is a really good idea.
I can address that.
Yeah.
We talked about putting at some point in time, we even talked about it during the joint meeting.
Yeah.
That this is a fire station committee, it's not a parking committee,
Right.
but we do have that property, and at some point in time, the town wants to spend the money on it, that's their available.
Yeah, I think our thought was, get the design for this completed, and then have probably the DPW start to look at, could we add a parking lot up there? It can't be part of this project really, because you need accessible parking for the uses that are here, but there's obviously a downtown parking problem that we could address here. So I think some of his sentence I wanted to address in that regard, but it was good. It was a good comment from him.
All right, and we received two letters from two members of the design review committee. Amy Koretsky's came in first, and hers was talks about the follow-up going forward, how tight the site is, the only green space between the building and the wall in the back of the building is being removed. Where will snow go? Where will dumpster go? I think we discussed that tonight.
Yeah, I think we answered most of the questions on here. about, you had mentioned the putting the thing up on the third floor. We answered that question. We talked about the option of burying it into the basement. We answered that question. You talked about the admin side expanding. We answered that question. And I'm just trying to make sure I'm covering everything here. We talked about, you had mentioned that these changes would just reduce the cost, but it won't affect the operations, and I think we addressed that. Actually, putting it in the basement would actually increase the cost potentially, as opposed to reducing the cost. I do have a question, Amy. You put something in there about fumes in the upstairs were questioned. I don't remember, because that's the whole reason for the Plimo vent systems. I don't remember that being questioned, but we may have addressed it with a Plimo vent system. Is that what you're talking about?
When I was just talking about going to the second floor,
Over the apparatus
over
bay.
the apparatus bay, Don had asked about the fumes and the architects
Okay.
said that they designed against it, but you've decided that you're not going to the second floor, so it doesn't really matter now anyways.
Were there any other questions that you had asked that,
I don't have it in front of me.
okay.
The why 4 stairwells versus 3?
Yeah, but, so she's asking why there are 4 stairwells in this. In the original 2019 design, there was 3, now there's 4. Because we put a stairwell over by the mezzanine, which wasn't there before, to access the mezzanine, as opposed to having to try to use a ladder to access the mezzanine, which was much more dangerous, and it actually reduces the ability to use that for storage. So that's what the extra stairwell was for.
Okay, and then the second one came in from Lisa Maselli. Talks about Rick Leaf appearing and start creating the look that the residents wanted to create. She asked for red brick and arches. I don't know if that's something you want to respond to, Chief.
We can, yeah, and again, I think that was heard. The architects had mentioned that they've actually changed it so you could see the more red in the bricks, and we all agreed that that was kind of a nicer look with a brighter red, but we still talked about muted and not all the, so it's not just radically different colors. The arches that we have in there, the committee looked at 1 arch, 2 arch, 3 arch, 6 arches. We looked at arches over the door, no arches over the door. We looked at all of those things. And there was a lot of discussion about Richardsonian arches, which now, as a fire chief, I know more about than I ever wanted to know. And thank you, Jenna, for loaning me the book, because I read it and I looked at all the pretty pictures. Some of those are pretty intense. I'd love to have one of those big arches. They're pretty cool. But again, we thought that too many arches, and correct me if I'm wrong, guys, was too busy. Is that correct? Okay. Keystones. And again, one of the big things I talked about earlier is how we can keep the price of this down. Any of those decorative items, keystones, granite, more arches, that just drives the cost up. So we were trying to, I was, and I think the rest of the committee was, and I don't want to speak for you guys, so please, I'm doing all the talking here. I'd like to hear your opinion on some of these things as well. You all have copies of these letters in your packets, and you all received copies of the letters. So I'm kind of curious if anyone else has, either with Amy's or with Lisa's.
I mean, as far as keystones, I think we haven't gotten into that level of detail of the design yet to even, I don't think we've discussed them really. We haven't seen a design with them unless I missed that. My assumption is that's a level of detail that we can get into later that doesn't impact the conclusion of schematic design.
It impacts the cost estimate.
Right, no, I understand that. Yeah, as we go through design development, we tweak things, and sometimes some of those, hopefully most of those tweaks will reduce the price. Some of them may increase the price a little bit. I don't.
But we should buy as much as we can right now.
Yeah.
Meaning, if
Sure.
we
Good point.
are
That's how
proposing
you see
something
it.
that costs more, now's
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah, and I don't.
And then you compromise later, right?
Yeah.
But to Mitch's point, this is not like putting something in the basement, which has got a ripple effect in terms of time and cost to estimate that, and they just blow the price up that much further. So, it's tactical by comparison.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I mean, I know what a keystone is visually. I don't know how it would look to me. Certainly not to a design professional on this particular building. I don't think it's unreasonable to think about that.
But you also want to use a detail that maintains the integrity of the design.
Right, and
I don't want to see keystones used as
Yeah.
wallpaper.
Yeah.
you know, just stuck on a building
Yeah.
to give it some interest.
Right.
That it totally violates
Okay.
the integrity of the design work they're doing.
Mhm.
So I would be careful, as I said,
Yeah.
too much historical detailing can get expensive
Mm-hmm.
and lend a note of falsity to the design.
And if I may, Madam Chair, one of the things we talked about early on was how those little things add up in maintenance.
Mhm.
Because, you know, all those decorations, now you gotta paint them, now you gotta maintain them, so your ongoing cost, not only is your cost of the building go up, but your ongoing maintenance costs are now accelerated, right? Because you have a lot more stuff you have to maintain. If you start putting wood everywhere, wood does not belong on the exterior of a fire station, I'm sorry, it doesn't. It's not gonna hold up. I want my station to stand there after Hurricane Katrina comes through, not have everything ripped off of it. So that's why we build them out of brick, right? Did you, because I had a few other things I just wanted to mention that were in here. Okay, Lisa mentioned they didn't see materials that were being offered. We don't have those materials at this time to show, right? Because there's been no, like materials on the building, the bricks or the.
actual brick or the shows of brick, we haven't selected the brick yet.
Okay. So we wouldn't have anything like that to offer anyway.
We will eventually have materials.
Yep.
We will show the committee,
Mhm.
and the committee will look and say, I like this direction like Diane was talking about, you can't look at exactly the red, but we'll come close. And that's what we'll put in under our
Okay.
specifications, and we'll see what gets submitted, so we can close.
Lisa also mentioned that maybe we should really look at changing the location. I'd like to know any input from the members of the committee on that.
Town meeting approved this as the site for the fire station. It was warrant article title, it was in the detail, it was shown. If we determine that this site is unfeasible for a fire station, then we go back up the ladder. We go to the select board, then we go to town meeting and undo it. Unless this committee thinks this is unfeasible, this is what town meeting has dictated.
So what does the committee, I'll read it.
Yeah, and I think it's very feasible. It's a little bit more challenging than we hoped 5 years ago, but it's still very, very feasible. The town meeting has dictated that, and that's the end of that discussion, from my perspective.
I agree.
You all read it. I don't know if there's anything else in here that Lisa, there's anything else we missed that you'd like me to make sure I mention?
To that point, we won't know until you get the blasting and all that information out. That changes a feasibility of the one. And that's what I'm talking about. If in fact, everything that you have put into how you're going to get the building on the lot turns out to be cost ineffective, then it has to be looked into another area.
Even blasting is not gonna cost that much in this small area. It's not a seven figure. You guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I wouldn't think it would be that high, over $1 million or a couple $1 million to blast there.
And
Todd?
realistically, another site is going to take 2 years to get to this point if we start.
At least.
At least.
So then your cost.
It's cost plus. It's, you know, sunk costs, literally figures, sunk cost of what we've done so far.
Everything we've done so far,
Property, all the surveys we've done.
all the contracts we
Project
are,
management, the contracts we've had, all that,
Start over.
restart the clock.
so that's 3.5 million right now. Okay.
Okay. And that takes care of all the public comments.
Could I, Madam Chair, can I make, sorry, one other comment that was in Lisa's letter that I think is worth addressing. Near the top, she makes a comment, which I appreciated, that there was some public comment on January 17th. And then I think it was about a week later that there was a design review meeting, and the question was why were we getting the same presentation that was at the public comment? And that's good. That's because this committee, the Fire Station Building Committee, is the client. And anything that you were going to present on our behalf needs to come through this committee first. And if you had made substantive changes to the design and then presented them to design review or zoning board or planning board or anything else, we would have a real issue with that, and I know you wouldn't do that. So I think it's a reasonable question, but I think a very reasonable answer as to, we had blessed a particular design, and that became your task to go ahead and present that design.
If I may, Madam Chair, Mitch, that leads me to another question or comment. First of all, I want to apologize to everyone I invited to come to the Design Review Committee meeting and wasn't able to participate. You were put into the audience. it was my understanding that we represent the owners. So just as if you were building a building, the owners would be there to talk, we should be there because we're the ones, they can't say, yes, we'll do that, no, we won't. That's really our thing to say, right? So I'm hoping at the next meeting, and it's really gonna be up to the chair, I'm really hoping that we can participate in that next design review meeting. I really think.
Yeah, I think it's a complicated question, because typically an owner is represented by one person. We are not one person. We are a public body. No one person can completely represent us and make commitments. The chair is the person who represents us when there's a singular person representing us, or anyone that you delegate. I think it probably makes sense before the next design review committee meeting is to have a discussion, maybe with the town administrator, to offer some suggestions as to how things are commonly done in this situation, so that it isn't a joint meeting.
No, it's not a joint meeting.
It is a design review committee meeting. Design review runs that. Does it make sense to have a full public body also in participation there? I don't know. I could see it both ways. It's a complicated and weird thing to figure out. But I think probably maybe the two of you and the town administrator and the chair of the design review could sit down, however we want to work on that beforehand, so that there's a clear expectation that follows through. It was just.
I felt really bad. I can tell you that. I'm like, oh my God, I feel horrible.
Yeah.
Rules of engagement.
Yeah.
It's easy to do. I'll reach out to Amy and we can get together with the town administrator.
I can answer kind of quickly right now. We have the high school complex in front of the planning board for the design review, and it was the superintendent that came with the civil engineers and the architects. The whole school committee didn't come, or the building committee. It was just the superintendent that attended. So it just gets confusing because we had 12 people attending that were from the design group, and then all of a sudden we had the whole committee popping on the screen. And as a chair, it's hard to, you've got it's like the Brady Bunch, you've got all these blocks, and I can't even see them on the screen. But the way it's been done before is, we just had one person representing, which was the superintendent, Greg Martineau, and then the other team.
My suggestion is a few people get together. We don't decide it now. Figure it out. It's your meeting. You have the ultimate call, but I think we should all work together.
I think that makes sense.
Try to come up with
I
it.
was added late, and the chief was co-host, and I wasn't the co-host, so I didn't know.
That's because the meeting had to change from a meeting to a webinar, which I had said it should have been in the first one.
So it was all confusing. It was right before the meeting started on what was happening.
Okay, brings us to the next item, marketing. John, you sent me an idea.
Sure. I think it's early enough for us to think about how do we get broader awareness of this with the town? Because we're going to ask them to pay for this. And so I think a broad enough market awareness or project awareness is needed. That covers, I think, 3 areas. Social media, Chief, you started that already. That and the town website, the Q&A we've done, I think that's a good start. Signage. I think signage at the town hall, at the fire station, possibly the library, maybe, Melican School, in terms of people walking by seeing it.
When you say signage, what are you referring to?
Poster board or something like that? You showed me something recently.
Like I have at the station?
Yeah,
Okay.
something like that. I think we need what I'll call PR awareness, and so information in the local regs about the project, and certainly they cover this, but a little more information on that. Something at Apple Fest or Memorial Day Parade, Big Truck Day, an open house at the fire station, more visibility to what's going on for broad awareness. But just my thoughts. I don't know what the committee thinks about that.
Just let me jump in for a second, if I may, Madam Chair. So, the signs that we all talked about, and I mentioned this earlier before we started, but they were designed by a company in town. And when Deputy Espasy went over to talk to them, they said, okay, first thing, get rid of the damn QR code. It's too dangerous, get rid of it. Cool. And now do this, instead of putting one big sign that people can't see, do 2 different signs and do it as a triangle. And what we did was about half the cost of what I originally proposed. So the signs came in, there are 2 signs. We've already, the deputy sat down with Public Works. We've already figured out where it's going, the posts are gonna go in. So what it'll be is when you drive from either direction, what you'll see is the committee members, the fire station, and then the nb-firestation.org with a capital F and a capital S. That will redirect you directly to our webpage with all the information. It's got every presentation that we've had is all listed on there. Links to previous meetings are on there. I'm putting, if there's something else you want me to put on there, tell me and I'll put it on there.
But it's a good foundation to build from, you know, in the coming months as we learn more and have more information to put out there. Facts, you know, get the facts out there.
Yes.
Started, you know, FAQs.
Yeah, that was the deputy's idea. He's done a great job with it, and we've all worked on it, put some, and if you guys read those and you see something that's missing, something you want to say, just drop me an email and I'll go ahead and, but don't do a group email, just drop me an email. And then I'll put it in.
You've done a great job putting that website together. It's
You have.
really come a long way. That's great.
Trying to. Thank you.
And so, John, I think all your ideas are great, and I think we do need to start thinking about marketing for the next town. Another thing that you mentioned was the fact that we need to talk about how to finance it. And it's been in the works for years. It's had a placeholder in the capital budget for years. But I think it would be nice to have the town administrator come in, talk about the Proposition 2.5 override, how it needs to proceed, what we can do, what we can't do, and how it's going to fit in the budget as far as it be outside of the budget because it's going to be a debt exclusion. But I think it would be nice to get it on TV and let the public see exactly how it will be financed.
If you'd like, Madam Chair, I can reach out to him and ask him if he can attend our next meeting on the 28th, February 28th?
That would be great.
Well, that's gonna be a Zoom meeting though. Another one on the 28th, is that okay with you guys? If that's one, would you rather one?
I don't think there's any great urgency.
We can do it the
to have-
next one
to have
after
them
that.
Come in, but it doesn't matter to me.
No, I just don't want to get into town meeting.
So, well, talking about town meeting, I'll talk about that in a second, talk about marketing the town meeting, talk about that in a second, but, do you wanna do it, well, when would you like me to ask him to come?
February or March would be fine, I think.
Okay, I'll let him, sometime in February, March, we'll give you exact date later.
Yeah, see what works with his schedule, because he's
So,
going to be busy.
in line with John's marketing comment, I was approached today and asked, are you gonna present something at the town meeting this year? I said, oh, we're not gonna make it. He said, no, you're not listening to me. Are you gonna present the current status at the town meeting? I said, that's a good idea. So where we are, where we started, where we are, what we've sent out for schematic design, all that, I said, I would be happy to present that because I'm a eloquent speaker. And as long as the rest of the board is okay with that and doesn't have a problem with me representing and doing that presentation, I would be happy to do that, put something together in conjunction with our OPM and with our architects, so I have the right info and the right drawings and all that is okay with everybody.
I concur,
I think
but
it's a
I'm
great
saying,
idea.
while you got the audience, while you got the eyeballs and their hearts and minds, this is where we are, here's what the timeline is, and later in the year, we're gonna bring this to the table.
Yep, that's the intent, to give them all that information so they're aware.
I think the only problem is, not to be put down, because it's a great idea, is at the end of town meeting, and usually people leave, because things like that are presented at the end of town meeting.
I'll tell Tim that I need to be the first thing on the agenda. No, yeah, you're right, you're very right. And we don't know how many days we're going.
Yeah, I think it just needs to be inserted somewhere within the warrant. It does not need to necessarily be at the end.
But if I do it, it gets recorded, it's visible for everyone to see, and I'm perfectly okay if everyone's okay with that.
I think that would be a report, and reports how the committees are at the end.
I think the select board can be creative in terms of its creation of.
I love creative
board items.
stuff.
Oh, that would be great. Okay. All right. Now we're going back to the design for the approval. So,
Don?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to go back. I want to make two quick comments on marketing, which I'm very happy that John suggested we add to this agenda. It's always good. I love the idea of having something at the Applefest Street Fair. As soon as the Rotary starts advertising for booth space, we should try to get a really prominent booth. I think that's potentially really, the timing for that is absolutely perfect. We can bring plans, have a couple of members there to answer questions. I think that's really, really good. The other thing to think about is that for debt exclusions, most participants in town government can't market a certain outcome to a debt exclusion. You can.
I can't.
Oh, you can't? Well, you can answer questions.
I can answer
Yeah,
questions.
You
I
can't
can't
promote an
market it.
outcome. I can as an elected person. We can't spend
Can't spend
public
town
funds on it. So, most schools and most large capital projects, there will be some sort of a ballot question committee, is the legal term.
Yeah.
Some organization that forms to promote the outcome, that collects their own money and spends some money and does some things. I think it would be really, really helpful here. I don't know who that would be in town. I'll bet firefighters, fire department might have some ideas. Start thinking about that.
Well, we have.
Good. Okay, good.
To that point, when this comes up before the select board for a
Yeah.
vote,
Yeah.
are you allowed to vote?
Oh, yeah.
You are.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Same thing for me on the finance committee?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no financial benefit to either of us on this. That's what would
Right.
turn it into an ethics question. Debt exclusions do require a supermajority on the select board, so it needs 4 out of 5
No,
select board members to put it on
I
the
asked
ballot.
Tim that, and he said, no, it's a simple majority.
Simple majority to put it on the town meeting warrant, it absolutely is
He said the ballot
4/5.
was simple majority. I asked him that.
Yeah, he's wrong.
You don't have to yell.
He's great. I love him, but he's wrong. Yeah, debt exclusions absolutely require 4/5. But we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Okay. Back to the schematic design for approval. Do I hear a motion, discussion?
I move that we approve a study.
I'll
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Okay. You have our approval.
Thank you, guys, and I'm just gonna take a second, and it's already mentioned once, but the three of you and your whole crew and Todd and Tim have been working very difficult for us, very hard, difficult, been working very hard for us. And it's been difficult to do, I knew what I was saying. I just want to take a second publicly and thank you guys and say you've been doing a great job, you've been very receptive. Not only that, you pushed back when you should have. When I said, I want this bigger, you said, no, it doesn't need to be bigger. I said, I want it bigger. You said, no, it doesn't need to be bigger. Well, you won, I lost. But you were right. So I just want to make sure that publicly I thank you from the fire department for everything that you've been doing, so thank you.
And we all thank you for how easy you've been to work with and cooperative, so it's made our job easier. Okay, any other business that legally come before the committee?
Yes, we need to get the approvals for the supplemental services.
Yep, they need to get approval for the boring and,
Well, there was a question about how much solar array information is going to be done. So we did have a very small study to do some basic solar array information, geotechnical. We're gonna also have permitting, board things that are all part of supplemental, so we're gonna have to get your approvals to spend that money.
so all your town permits will be waived.
No, these are.
I'm just letting you know they're all gonna be waived.
I know, these are the planning board, like the actual going to be.
Yep.
So those are all part of the supplemental, you've approved them and signed it, but we do not do that work without individual approvals for each of those steps. You could approve them all right now, but we do one.
So there's no supplemental additional cost.
Oh, yes.
Oh,
yeah, there is.
So if you've already approved it.
Right.
It's all part of our contract.
Right.
But each individual item is noted separately. So
Okay.
like, for instance, if you said no PV, we would do not do any of the PV work. If you
Gotcha.
said, that you weren't gonna be involved in the FF&E or pre-qualifications, which we have to do by law, things like that, we wouldn't spend this money. So you need to authorize us, I've spoken to Tim and about this and Todd. So we asked for your approval, we asked for your approval when we started the, what was it? The traffic,
Mhm.
we got that, and that was before the committee even came together, I think. So we had that, so do we have your approval, or how do you give it?
Do
to
we
us?
have a motion? Diane?
We would have to have a motion in order to
Okay,
do
so
that
you
and
can
vote.
do it.
Okay,
Diana's gonna do the motion.
It's, yeah, move, go ahead. I'm not sure.
Chair asked me to move, so.
Yeah.
I was moving.
Okay. What do we put in there? Could you repeat what you're looking for approval on?
So there's the geotechnical engineering, which, the borings we talked about, that are gonna be happening. There was a small, study for PV, just for project viability. It's basically to say, you know, if we were to put PV on the building, how much would it be and about how much, you know, electricity could we generate? And then if you decide you want to move forward with it, then we have to get another engineer on board to design for that. So it's just the basic viability for that. Similarly, there was one for geothermal. If you were interested in pursuing geothermal, once they get the geotechnical data back, they can use some of that to analyze whether or not geothermal would even be feasible on the site. And then there was some permitting going to the planning board and a land disturbance permit. There were some fees with those. I think that was it, Richard.
Those are it for right now, but
Right
that
now.
Tim and I talked about. The rest of it is
So it's,
happened later.
it's geotechnical engineering,
Solar PV.
no, hang on, geotechnical engineering, the geothermal study,
Yeah.
that would be based after that,
Yes.
the PV study,
Yeah.
and the permits for land, and any permits as needed.
Yeah.
Is that your motion? Second.
I wrote them all down so we can get them right in.
Motion's been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, that was the legal, we come before the board, adjournment.
Madam Chair, a motion to adjourn?
It's like she's looking at me, she does that all the time. Second.
Motion's been made, seconded, all those in favor?
Yo.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
A few years